Hello everyone, and first of all, thank you for the many get well wishes during my cold. I'm indeed back on my feet. I launched my Mac and I welcome you to the final Advent Calendar video. Today we're going to put into practice a lot of the things that were part of the Advent Calendar series. We are going to convert a design into a real app. So we already have this great design that Nina created for us, which looks something like this, and this is what we are going to turn into a real app. So we're working with navigation bars, with table views, and so on. But since it's Christmas time, I also have 3 presents for you. First of all, my newest Udemy course, which is about using advanced iOS frameworks and techniques with Swift 3, which I highly recommend if you want to get in touch with the coolest iOS frameworks and create, for example, Today extensions, or use UI dynamics or custom presentation controllers for animation, and so much more. And from today until December 31st, you will save 93% on the regular price and just pay $10 for almost 6 hours of video content. To get it, just use the link in the info box below. My second present is another course at Udemy, also for $10 and also valid until December 31st, which is all about core data, which is great if you want to create an app that needs to store information. Core data is going to make your life so much happier. So if you're interested in that, you can go ahead and get this course for also $10, which is 87% less than the regular price, and you get almost 5 hours of video content. And I updated 40% of the course already to Swift 3. The rest of the updates is going to follow in January, and you will find the link for this course also in the info box below. And about the third present, we're going to talk at the end of this video. So now let's really convert this design into an app, and let's fire up Xcode for that. So I'm creating a new single view application, as we usually do in this Advent Calendar series, and we're maybe calling it Present Base. Click Next and create that on the desktop, and then we will frequently have a look at our design that we want to convert, really. So we first of all should analyze this a bit and think about what we really need as images, for example, and what we can do in Xcode. So at the top we have a standard navigation bar, which we can easily create in Xcode. We have one bar button item here, which is an add button, and this is also a standard plus or add or whatever you want to call it button, and this means that we do not need an image for that. Here we have a table view that also only has actually user-generated content with the images in the background, a black layer on top of it, and also some labels. So there is no fancy stuff here. Everything can be done in Xcode, and we do not need images. The only image we really need is this sleigh icon here, which we already got exported from Sketch in the video that Nina created for you. So what we should do here is using this shape icon, or whatever you want to call it, and import that into our project. And of course you will get all of these files with the tutorial files. So I'm bringing that into my assets folder, and it automatically groups that correctly, and we have the 2x and the 3x version because of the endings of the file names, which we have at 2x and at 3x. And with that, we have all the resource material that we really need in a productive app. Since we do not want to create or let the user create the background images, in our case, I have also added some names for our images, for the background images. I have provided some file names which are simple to use in code, which are just 1, 2, 3, 4, and I've also only generated a 2x version, which is sufficient for our tutorial's purpose. So I'm also going to drag them into my assets folder, but of course in a productive app we would get this from the user. But you've also learned in the Advent Calendar series how to use the image picker, so maybe you want to combine that knowledge later. And with that, we really have all of the resources we need, and we can go into our storyboard. And since we already know that our application uses a table view and we do not need any other user interface elements, we can create a table view controller. So this standard view controller, let's just delete that, we don't need that, and we're going to look for a table view controller just as we did in one of the table view controller tutorials. And now comes the interesting part. Since we want a navigation bar, and maybe we also want some navigation controller behavior if we were to continue creating this application. So we need a navigation controller, and we can do that really easily by selecting our table view controller, click on the editor button, select embed in, and select navigation controller. And this gives us a navigation controller, and now we also have a navigation bar already. But we do not have an initial view controller any longer. So if we were to run our application now, we just would get a black screen. So what we need to do is select this navigation controller and mark it or select it as our initial view controller. And with that, we have a navigation controller that is also displayed when we launch our application. We have a navigation bar, and we also already know that we need a bar button item, which these elements in this navigation bar, for example, are called. So it represents an item on a UI toolbar or a UI navigation item object. So we can use that bar button item and drag it to the right side of our navigation bar, and then we can choose a different system item, which is in our case add, and this gives us this little plus icon. This is exactly what we need. And now we have a navigation bar, we have the plus icon. We should give our table view cell a reuse identifier to get rid of this warning here. So I'm entering cell and build our application real quickly, and we're rid of the actual warning here. And then we can run this in a simulator and see how this looks. And the first thing I'd like to do next is actually giving it the proper colors. So let's just have a quick look here. So we have a table view, we have this plus button, but we do not have the colors that we really want. So when we have a look at our navigation controller and the navigation bar that we can select here, there is one checkbox here that says translucent. Since we do not want to have a translucent navigation bar, I simply deactivate that, and now we have a solid color. So we will not see any elements that are scrolling below it if we scroll through our table view. Let's now also change the color, which is pretty simple for a navigation bar because we can simply change the bar tint color. I'm selecting another color here because we have a custom color which I already picked, which is red 178, green 62, and blue 62 again in our RGB slider, and I'm simply dragging that color to my bar tint, and then we have the correct color. This is one option that you have, but you could also do something like that in code for the complete application by using the UI appearance class. And what we can do is in our app delegate, in did finish launching with options, we could use, for example, a navigation bar, take its appearance function here, and change the bar tint color, which does not seem to autocomplete, but should work. And then we could use UI color, black, blue, or a custom UI color. I'm just building that for you to see that this really works, and we get no errors. So you can simply use that, change any appearance attribute that you'd like, and this will be applied to your complete application. So this was the first step. We have our red navigation bar. So now what we also want to do is change the tint color of our button, which should be white. So I'm changing that to white right now. And if we now run our application in the simulator again, we get one problem in comparison to the design, which is frankly not that easy to solve if you don't know how, which is the status bar, which is still black. And there are two places where we need to configure our status bar. And besides from that, this already looks great. We have the correct background color. We have our plus button. It's also white. So let's change the status bar for our complete application. So we're going back to app delegate, and we can change the status bar style with UI application, UI, not UI appearance, but UI application shared, and use the status bar style. And we have two options here. We have default and light content, which is intended for use on dark backgrounds. So if we do that now and run that in the simulator, we have one little problem, which is, let's have a look, there is no change. So why is that? This is because we have to go into our info plist and make a slight adjustment here as well. So I'm right-clicking here and add a row, and what we want to add is the view controller based status bar appearance, which is a bool, and we want to set this to no, because otherwise we cannot apply one style for our application or one style for our status bar for the whole application. Only if we set this bool to no, we can do what we just did in app delegate, and if we now run our application, we should get a nice and white status bar, and indeed it is white. So now this was the easy part. Let's now figure out how we can create our table view cells. So we're going back into our main storyboard and have a look at one of our prototype cells. Since we're going to reuse them, we only have to configure them once. And very important is the row height for us. So I'm going to set that to 150 pixels. And in the background, when we have a look at the design, we have an image of a person. So we're going to use an image view for that. Let's just start with that. All right, so UI image view, let's type that into our object library, and let's just drag and drop that in the right corner or in the top left corner and adjust the size. Since we want our background image to fill the complete cell, we can use auto resizing masks to pin the UI image view to all the four edges and also make it stretch in width and height. So this is the first step. And we could also add an image for that. I'm just quickly choosing 3, for example, here. And as you can see, the image is a little distorted. So what we can do is change the content mode to aspect fill. This should do it. And also activate clip to bounds so that the image does not reach out of the bounds of the UI image view. And if we have a look at our design again, we can see that there is kind of a black layer on top of that. And we can use two components to achieve that. Either we are using a UI view or we're using a UI image view. And we're using an image view, although we do not place an image into it, but the reason for that is that we can place other UIKit components on top of that without them becoming children of the image view. They would become children of a UI view, and I just don't want that because the handling is a little easier that way. And then I'm changing the background color of my UI image view to black, and I'm reducing the alpha to 0.4 so that we get this nice effect. And we should also go into the size inspector and pin our view to all the four edges and make it stretch in width and height. So with that, we're almost completely done. What we now still need are some labels. So I'm choosing one label here, positioning it somewhere in the center. And this was, if we have a look at our design, this was dad. So let's rename that to dad and change the color to white. And let's change the size to, I think it was 25. And then we can increase the size here to the width of the complete cell and center the text just like that. And then I'm moving it down a little and simply copying that and again moving it down. And then we had some kind of tag as the item that dad in this case gets, and we're reducing the size here to 16 or 15 maybe. And if we have a look at the design again, then there is also this little line here that we also want to add, but in this case we can really use a UI view for that. So I'm just dragging that one to here and change the size a little to a width of 60 pixels and a height of 2 pixels. And let's also move that down a little so that we can see it better. And now there is the question of positioning and how to lay out that, or how to lay out that cell in a way so that we can use it on different screen sizes. As we did with the UI image view in the background, also with the color layer, which is also an image view, we used auto resizing masks for that. This won't be possible for the text or for the label and the UI view here. We have to use constraints for that, but this works greatly together with our auto resizing masks of the two UI image views, because there is no relation between our labels that are going to get constraints and the UI view, this line here, that's going to get constraints. And as long as there is no relation between an element using auto resizing masks and an element that uses constraints, there is no problem. So we can start with this view by fixing its width and height. And I'm pressing Control on my keyboard and dragging in my view controller scene in this way. And then I press Shift on the keyboard and select width and height to fix the width and height of my view. And then I also want to position it in the center. So how do I do that? I'd simply press Control again, click and drag to my content view of the cell, and tell it to center horizontally and vertically by pressing Shift on the keyboard and hitting Return. So now we have the constraint, but we have a misplacement because our view is not in the center. But what we can do is click on this yellow circle here, click on the exclamation mark, and tell Xcode to update the frames. And with that simple trick, our view is in the center. And now maybe we should increase the size of some kind of text stuff to 16 again. I think it's too small. So with that, we only need to apply some constraints to our two labels. So first of all, I'm going to use the name label. And I'm going to press Control on the keyboard and drag to the content view, and I want this to have a leading space to the container margin and a trailing space. And I want this to have a vertical space of the pixels I've just selected to my little view. So I'm selecting vertical spacing here, and now we have exactly the distance as it has right now. But due to the intrinsic content size of our label, what we should do is again update the frame, because we have an actual Y position of 41 and we should have a Y position of 33 depending on the height, which is actually 22 and 30 is expected. So let's just quickly change that, update that frames, and we're done. And then we move our other label a little bit more to the top, and we create almost the same constraints as we did for the upper label. So leading space to container margin to the container view of our, or the content view of our cell, trailing space to container margin, and we also want a vertical spacing to our view, to this line. So I'm selecting vertical spacing, and we again update our frames with this quick click here. And then I actually want this to be a little more to the bottom, something like that. And then what we can also do, instead of updating the frames, we can also update the constraint. And with that, we have completely created our user interface, with the exception of the icon in the center of our navigation controller, and this is something that we are going to do in a second. But we need a class for our table view controller first. We only have a class for our view controller yet, so I am right-clicking on that, delete that view controller class, and then selecting the app delegate, pressing Command N on the keyboard, selecting a new Cocoa Touch class, and then maybe Christmas presents UI table view controller. So we are creating a class that is called Christmas Presents Table View Controller, which is, of course, a subclass of UI Table View Controller. Click Next and Create. And then we are going to connect this class with our Table View Controller in the storyboard. So I'm selecting my Table View Controller, selecting the Identity Inspector, and then selecting Christmas Presents Table View Controller. All right. So now we can also add our little sleigh icon to the top, and therefore I am removing all of the stuff here in View to Load, and I am creating an icon image view, which is a UI image view. Initialize it with an image, so we use UI image named, and the sleigh icon was named shape, so I'm using that name here as well. And then all I need to do to place that icon in the center of our navigation bar is use self.navigationItem.title view, which is the center of our navigation bar. And what I can do here is simply assign my icon image view. Let's build that. This works. Let's run that as well and see what happens. So here's the simulator, here's our application, and we do not see any cells yet, but this is going to change in a second, but we already have our sleigh icon right here. So to work properly with our cells, we also need a subclass of UI table view cell. So I'm pressing Command N again on my keyboard and selecting a new Cocoa Touch class, and maybe let's say presence UI table view cell. So we're getting a class which is a subclass of UI table view cell. We are calling it presence table view cell, and this is the place where we're going to create outlets for the different labels and image views that we have created for our cell. And I'm selecting that cell now in my view controller scene, selecting our custom class, which is the presence table view cell, and then we can bring up the assistant editor and select, hopefully, most of the times this works, but sometimes it doesn't. You should automatically get the proper table view cell here as a second automatic option, but if it doesn't, we choose manual, present space, and then we select presence table view cell, and then we can create the outlets that we need for our table view cell, which is first of all the name label, which is our first outlet. So I'm pressing Control on my keyboard again, dragging to the right in my into my presence table view cell class, and we have an item label, and we have our image view, our background image view. And these are the three outlets that we are going to need to populate our table view. And we could add a lot of more properties to that depending on how many items we have in our design and what we want to configure in our cell. So let's close down the assistant editor, and we are actually prepared and ready. And now let's just go back to the Christmas presents table view controller and create a very quick data model that I've already prepared. So I'm just pasting that right here. I've called that my gifts, and this is just an array of dictionaries, and this is actually one line in our one cell in our table view controller. So we have this dictionary with the key name. This is in our first case best friend. We assign image 1 to our best friend, and the item that our friend gets is a camera, and so on. So we have just an array of dictionaries here as a data model, and you could get this information from a database or from the internet or whatever. And now what we can do is, first of all, return the number of sections in our table view, and we also should use the my gifts array and count that to create the number of rows in our section. And then we can already adjust the self-row at index path function and configure our cells. So the most important aspect here is now to change the reuse identifier to the reuse identifier we use, which is cell, and also cast our cell that we dequeued to a presence table view cell. And with that done, we can actually create a present or a gift object and use my gifts and the index path dot row to get the proper gift object from our array depending on the row or depending on the cell that we are currently in. And then we can use our cell and, for example, the background image view and simply assign a new image, which is UI image named, and then we simply take our gift object, and since this is a dictionary, we can use the image key here and unwrap that because we know that there is an image behind that. And then we can also use the name label, change its text attribute, and set this to our gift object and the name key. And we can use the cell and the item label, its text property, and set it to gift object and item. And that's how simple it is. And this is also the common approach if you would use core data, or if you use CloudKit, you would have an object and access its properties depending on the row you're currently in. And actually, with that, we can give this a try and see how this works. So I'm bringing up the simulator again. And here we go. Come on. So here is our cell, and we have our images, we have our content, but the problem seems to be that our cells do not have a proper height. So what we can do about that is, for example, use the height for row at index path delegate function of the table view and simply return 150 here. So let's run this again and see if this looks better already. So back in the simulator, and here we are. Pretty cool, isn't it? So we have our design almost completed, but there is actually a little gap between those images. And what we can do about that is we go back into our storyboard, let's zoom in a little here, and we reduce, let's say, the height of the image view and of the background to 148 pixels. And with that, we have quite a distance between, or a distance of 2 pixels between each new cell. And what we also should do then is deactivate the bottom pin of our auto resizing masks so that we do not pin it directly to the bottom, but to the distance that we have just created for it. And then if we run this in the simulator again, we should have a pretty great result. And we should have translated that very nicely. So there is this cool distance, and if we run this in an iPhone SE simulator, we should also be able to scroll a little, since the iPhone 7 is just a little too big for that and our 4 items. So here we are in the iPhone SE simulator, and here we can scroll a little bit more, and this works really nicely. This looks very cool, and we have converted this cool design into a really working application. And if you'd like to continue working on this particular app, let me know it in the comments below. But let's now talk about the third present that I promised at the beginning of this video, which is the Swift Tutorial Conference Bundle, which includes tons, actually over 10 hours of so cool stuff about speech recognition, SiriKit basics, SpriteKit for Apple Watch, new features and practices for CloudKit, all introduced by Apple this year at WWDC, normally priced at about $70, and now you get this complete bundle with over 10 hours of content for just $29. But there are also 3 words hidden in this video. If you find those 3 words and send them to me via email to youtube@brianadmin.com, then the first 10 people will get the complete conference bundle for free, and the next 90 people will get it for just $10. So if you were to get the conference bundle for $10 and buy the 2 courses at Udemy also just for $10, you would spend $30 and you would get over 30 hours of video material for the holidays, and you could learn so much. You would actually just pay $1 for 1 hour of content. I think this is pretty great, and this is my way of thanking you for this whole year, which was incredible. Thank you all, and happy holidays.